Thank you, and thank you for coming. It's really good to be here. Yes, I'm a third year curate. I have received my meeting date with the bishop. I got that yesterday, so soon to be signed off, hopefully. And prior to becoming a curate, I worked as part of the leadership team with a charity that engaged with women whose lives are impacted by on-street survival sex work, which is an unusual thing to do. Always a topic of conversation when you go on holiday. And prior to that, the reason I was there was in my early 40s, I had 2 bouts of cancer. And after the final set of treatment, which I just thought, this is just, I'm now a product of the miracle of God, because I've been born 100 years ago, I would be dead. So I handed my life over to God and said, this is all bonus and it's all yours. Wow. So then I ended up working for the charity. It's a Christian-based charity. From that, into Christian leadership. And I look in the mirror every day and I'm amazed. I've got this around my neck because I started off as a Baptist. So life is very spirit-led and open to God's direction. So when I was going for my little, you go for like this speed dating thing with your prospective training incumbents, where they sort of make this date and you go and you talk to each other and you find out whether you like each other, and then you don't tell each other whether you like each other or not, and then you write back to the bishop to say, I don't like it. Or and Gav and I got on really well, but the thing that really drew me to working with Gav at Oxford in Washington was the curacy profile, which had a really strong remit to church plant, and there was funding for that. So my pioneering spirit and my spirit-led view on life was like, oh yeah, that's really exciting. That'll be a good curacy to jump into, which I did. And initially, it was very slow going. We pushed a few doors in neighbouring parishes that were in vacancy, and the answer that we got was, oh, there's a plan for that. No, that's not for you. There's a plan for that. There's a plan for that. So after about 12 months, we just sat back and thought, right, okay then. Where are we going to go? And unbeknownst to us, about a 20-minute drive away in a completely different deanery was Seaham Church, and the vicar there was looking to retire. The church was run down. It wasn't, I have to be careful what I say, it wasn't flourishing, is the word. And it's a church built in 1857 with an attached church hall, which is very great and usable. And Gav and I prayer walked around the church, and both of us decided to say, yes, we would plant into this church. Now, this is quite exciting because Oxford Church isn't big. So we're doing this from a place of weakness. We're doing this saying, God, is this right? If not, please give us a no. And we prayed for God to give us a no, and he didn't. So we said yes. So on January, beginning of January 2024, first Sunday, I walked in there with Archdeacon Bob, and we had a small congregation of 10 people looking very expectantly. And Archdeacon Bob said, previous vicar's retired, this is Anita. The diocese, we're going to close you down. Anita's got 2 years to turn that around. So, and that was it. And I had 2 people from Oxford who said, we'll come and give you moral support. And that was my team. So on a Sunday, they would come and make the tea, which was great. Sadly, a 20-minute drive doesn't work. So 6 months in, there was just me. And I'm in the church with no warden, no PCC, no treasurer, no safeguarding officer, an open graveyard with 8,500 bodies in it. 2 bells, one of them which doesn't work, actually, so I don't have to worry about bells. A small church of elderly ladies. And our plan, we were like, right, okay, this is going to be great. Oxford Church has got this big double-decker bus. We do loads of youth work. We'll honour the 10 o'clock service until everybody dies. that's the graveyard full, so we can close the graveyard. And church plan, an afternoon service, we specialise in families, so we'll at church plan, an afternoon service, and we'll bring the double-decker bus because there's a big secondary school, the only secondary school in Seaham, literally across the road, built on the old pit. So that was and we were going to, like, if we heard of champing, it's glamping only in a church. So we had this vision where the youth would come down the youth retreat centre, they'd be sleeping between the pews, they'd be going down to see them to collect glass, and we had this whole 5-year plan. And I went into the next service on my own the following Sunday morning, and all the plan just disappeared. In one sense, because I've been in a meeting with the bishop, big meeting about the funding, and he's a little curate sat there, and he said to everybody, Anita, you're going to church planting to see him. Don't worry if you fail, because you can't make it any worse. Great. This reminds me of, I've just done the first aid course. You learned about CPR and you've got the body on the floor. And they're saying how many breaths and how many compressions. And it's like, it doesn't really matter because you can't make them any worse. So I started. The bit they didn't tell us. They did tell us that the church was dying. They did tell us that there was no PCC, no governance, targeted congregation. What they didn't tell us was this parish had a thriving funeral ministry. And in the first 2 months, I did around 15 funerals, travelling 20. It's every time I did a funeral visit. So it was an hour round trip, and an hour round trip for every funeral. Well, that gave me 15 opportunities to sit on 15 sofas in 15 homes and say, I am here and you're looking at me because the previous vicar's retired and the diocese are thinking of closing the church. You can't close the church, that's our church. We got married there, we've got our kids christened there, don't go. That's our church. So word got around very quickly that there was 2 years, we only had 24 months to keep Christchurch open, and it spread like wildfire, which was great. So the other thing that when you go on a first aid course and you're learning about somebody who's dead on the floor is they might be breathing. So you get the defibrillator out, and we were shown how to use a defibrillator, and the defibrillator works by shocking the heart back into rhythm. And what I found in Seaham was it wasn't that the heart in the church wasn't beating at all, is that it was in defibrillation. The heart of the church was beating in different places, and that news that the church would have closed was like the defibrillator shock, and it shocked the community into pulling together. So that was the sentiment that was happening behind what we were doing. So we completely shelved the champion plan and the youth retreat plan because people started returning to church, and people said to me, don't devote time to funerals, there's no fruit in funeral ministry. Absolutely rubbish. I was like, okay, watch me, because I would say of those 15 families, at least 50% of them returned or started coming to church. And the 5 o'clock service, there's a little story to tell about that, because we had lifted the model that we were using in Oxford, which was aimed at young families, because Oxford Church has a play cafe aimed at young families, and I tried to just lift it and plonk it into Seaham and say, we're going to copy this at 5 o'clock. Again, it didn't work, because the people who were coming to church were bereaved families. There were people who were socially isolated. There were people who were struggling in the community. So we adapted what we did and changed it into Cafe Church, which uses a similar principle, but engages with the way people process information. So we do a quick 5-minute input and give 20 to 25 minutes for people to sit around a table and chat. or sit in our prayer room quietly, or sit and soak in music, or sit and do mindful colouring, or sit and stare at a candle for 20 minutes. And then we come back together and say, what have you learned? What have you learned about God? What have you learned about yourself? What are you going to do about it? So we're getting about 16 people coming to the 5 o'clock church service. The 10 o'clock morning service, which started with 8 old ladies, we're now joining 52 people, some of whom are from the local community involved with Addictions North East who are in recovery. And considering that that's a little bit of my background, I have not in any way reached out to this charity or any of these people. This is purely God. They are literally walking through the door. The first lady walked through the door and said, I've come because God has told me to come. And every week she brings the people that she's working with, peers, because she's on her own addiction recovery journey, because in their program they talk about a higher power, and they're coming in saying we want to learn who this higher power is. And I'm going to stop there.